We want to help you be the very best missionary so that you can give your very best to the people you're serving. What makes this podcast unique is it's done by missionaries for missionaries. How can we take timeless principles and apply them to our lives as missionaries? That's really our heart behind this. Welcome to this episode of Modern Day Missionaries. I am thrilled to have with us our president and founder of Modern Day, Elias Reyes. And Elias, some of you have heard him before, he's been on a previous episode, but Elias, before starting Modern Day, was a financial consultant, and he did it for over 20 years. He's worked with churches, with missionaries. He's got a Harvard MBA, and he really knows what we're talking about today. And that is the topic of finances, but we're going to take it from a different angle, and that's how missionaries can plan for the future. And we're going to do that talking about investments, income, owning assets. You're going to want to take notes on today's episode. But Elias, just really glad to have you with us again today.
Well, I'm glad to be here. This is a topic that I am very passionate about, the future of our missionaries, make sure they finish well. I think that just in general, what we're finding in America, that it's getting harder and harder for people to retire. I think there's a statistic out there that says that today, 20% of people over 65 are still working. In 1985, that number was 10%. So we now have twice as many older people working, and it's because it's just getting tougher to retire.
Well, and say more about that too with missionaries, because I hear the statement a lot. Maybe you have to, I don't want to retire, I want to refire. So what does that look like in the context of missions?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the sayings that I have is, live your life today in such a way that you have a choice for the future. So I think that that choice should be up to the missionary when they get to that point. So when they get to 60, 65, 70, it should be something that they decide, not that is decided for them because of economic reasons.
So, what you're really saying, Elias, is not that they should plan to stop doing ministry. This isn't some sad thing that they're planning for that they might have to stop serving the Lord. You're saying set things up so that you have an option because you don't know what the future holds in terms of your health, in terms of what God might be calling you to do, in terms of maybe the country you're serving in and what that looks like. So, giving yourself more options.
Yeah, because we plan our steps, but God, we plan our future, but God's really directing our steps. So we really don't know what's going to happen. And all I'm saying is, hey, let's just prepare ourselves so that when we get to that point, we have flexibility.
Yeah, which is huge too. I think for those of us who have children as well, it really is a wonderful thing we can do for our kids because if we're living day to day and we're not thinking through our financial future, then they're the ones who are growing up looking at us going, "Oh my gosh, I have to plan for my future and also for that of my parents as well."
Yeah, yeah.
And so have you seen this happen in the lives of missionaries?
Well, I think that having been involved with missions for about 30 years, I see all types of variations for this. But many times, you see where a family has to leave the field, and it's oftentimes related to finances, one way or another. And it could be that they got to a point where now they got to come and concentrate on something else, like getting kids into university or something. So there's just all these different variations of where it really matters that the more hard work that you put up front, that it could help you in the future.
Yes. And I love what you're saying there. I think sometimes for those of us who really have strong faith in the Lord, which is most missionaries, I would say, or all missionaries, sometimes you feel like you have to pick between faith and planning regarding your finances. Like if I plan financially for my future, that means that I don't have faith that God will take care of me. But you're suggesting, hey, we can do both.
Well, I just wanted to share a little story, personal testimony of my own. Uh, 4 years ago, every year I try to go on a vision retreat 2 or 3 times a year just to get away for 2 or 3 days and just, Lord, what are you saying in my life? And so I went in 2019. This was April, and through that 3 days, the Lord just spoke to me, and He said, "Focus on your retirement." And at that time, I was 56, so I'm now 60. But I was 56, and then I realized it's like, well, I had not really focused on my retirement. Now, I did have some things in motion, but all of a sudden, it was like, okay, so now I need to really start focusing. And as I started focusing, basically what happens is when you focus on something, new opportunities start arising. Well, the opportunities have been there all along, but because you weren't focusing, you didn't really see these opportunities. And, so the Lord through that said, okay, focus on your retirement. And incidentally, he also said to me, forgive a friend of mine who I had done business with who owed me money. And so it was two things. It's like the Lord was, saying, focus on your future, but forgive. And through those two pieces of obedience, the Lord then opened up a few months later, that person introduced me to a businessman who needed help for financial help. And the Lord just used that in over 2 years that it really blessed me and was a game changer in terms of my retirement.
Wow. So he used forgiveness and planning for the future hand in hand.
Yeah, yeah,
God is so interesting in the ways that he works. But it took you following him in both of those steps.
yes.
Wow, I love that. Okay, so Elias, there were 3 areas that you really wanted to hit today: investments, income, and owning assets. Where should we begin?
Okay. Well, all of these are connected with the general topic of creating wealth. And what I mean by wealth is something that when you go to retire, there's these things that you can fall on. And so I'm going to start off. Well, the three are, or you mentioned the three, but the first one that I'm going to start off with is income. And with income, so let's say that according to the IRS, all of the modern day missionaries are independent contractors. Okay, that's the term, that's the legal term, which really means that all of them are actually independent business people and they have a business, and that business is missions.
That is such an
And
interesting way of looking at it.
so, I want to start off with saying the first place to start is with your business, and that's your ministry. And so there's things that you can do in your current ministry to excel in it. And, so make sure you're investing in your skills, make sure that you're investing in donor support. I recommend every missionary spend 4 hours a week dedicated to their donor care. So just communicating with donors, informing donors, communicating through social media. So all of that comes to their primary source of income, which is their donations.
Okay, Elias, it's fascinating that you're saying this too, because you're bringing up this different lens, this different way of looking at something that I think is probably gonna challenge everybody. And if you think about a business and you think about a team, because that's what we are with our support team, we are a team, there is a manager of that team. And what would a manager look like if they did not take care of their team and if they were not communicating with their team? This is a totally different way of looking at it. I really am fascinated by this approach. Okay.
Well, because I think that sometimes, especially, modern day, we have a lot of young people. And so a lot of young people might be thinking, why do I need to really plan for the future? It's so far away. But I want to give a story of one of our missionaries, and he's been with us 10 years. He's been with us for a long time. But when he started, he was a 20 something. He was young and really young in ministry, maybe a little awkward here and there. And but I was just in preparation for this podcast, I was looking at, well, how has his income grown over the years? And from like 2000 2017 till today, it has almost doubled. So here's this young guy who has grown in his ministry. He's grown in leadership responsibilities. And now his income has almost doubled. And so I think every missionary should be kind of thinking that way is how can I be more of a leader? How can I be more of whatever it is that I'm doing so that my influence starts growing and people want to sow into my ministry.
So investing into other relationships, but also investing in yourself, investing in your skills, realizing that's going to pay off.
Yeah.
Ah, I love this.
Well, I want to share one of my favorite verses in the Bible, and this has been, really one of my life verses. There's actually two verses, but let's just call it a verse. But it's from the book of Ecclesiastes. It is chapter 11, and it's verse 1 and 6. All of them are good, but I'm going to talk about 1 and 6. And I want to share it in two versions because I want you to hear the nuances because it's what does it really mean? But verse 1 says, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. In the morning sow your seed, and in the evening do not withhold your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, either this or that, or whether both alike will be good." Okay, so that I love it. This is one of my favorite. But now I'm going to say it in the New Living Translation. So it's a little more, today's lingo. It says, "Send your grain across the seas, and in time, profits will flow back to you. Plant your seed in the morning and keep busy all afternoon, for you do not know if profit will come from one activity or another, or maybe both." So, what I want to draw from this is it really talks about planning, but it talks about diligence, but it talks about not putting all of your eggs in one basket. It basically says, for you do not know which will prosper, either this or that, or whether both alike will be good. So, what I want to talk about now is how can a missionary have multiple streams of income? And so with multiple streams of income, and there are so many different things that people can do. But you can look at your life, your skills, your hobbies, and ask yourself, what can I do to create other revenue other than donations? So I wanted to share three of our missionaries and what they do. Okay, so one of them, very cool idea. She and her husband make these bows. I mean, they're just bows that, you kind of go in your head, little girls with their little bows, and they just sell them. They sell them through Etsy, and I think it's Etsy.
Etsy.
E
Yeah.
Etsy, thank you. So they sell them, and they do very well with these, and, so they've learned how to promote and how to get these out there, how to, the whole process. So that's one of our missionaries. Another one, uh I follow her and her husband on Facebook, and there she is. I mean, she is a personal trainer, virtual. So she is just coaching people on health habits. So I'm looking at there and there she is doing all this stuff. I sweat just kind of looking at her videos. But then a third example is I was actually at a conference here in the area, and one of our missionaries was with me, and this person has a lot of wisdom, and people were just coming up to him in this setting and asking him questions, and how can I do this? How can I do that? I just told him, I said, look, you need to be a coach. Is like you need to develop a plan. These people, they want what your wisdom. It's like, create a plan and set up like a weekly, monthly meeting with that person, and you're coaching them through their situations, and which he did do that. So those are just examples of some multiple streams of income. And I mean, there's so many things that people can do. Okay.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Okay, I have a question for you along those lines. some people listening to this might think, well, how do I keep that other opportunity or stream of income from distracting me from what I'm, called principally here to do, which is missions?
Okay. So this is a very interesting question because I think that I'm going to kind of give a non-traditional take on it. But I think that the assumption sometimes that we make, which could actually be a presumption, is that 100% of our time should be spent on missions. Now, I'm saying you could be 100% present in another country. Okay, so this isn't about that, but I think that just because God has us focused as a full time missionary, and the best example in the Bible was the Apostle Paul, who basically talks about being a tent maker, but he was fully engaged in missions, but he was basically saying, "Hey, I don't want to put this financial strain on people. I'm going to do my tent stuff to create additional revenue." So I think it's about a balance. It's not so much that you don't want this to get out of control. You don't want this to impact donors. Like this, your donors are not a multi-level marketing, partners. So this isn't about that. This is about, finding something that you can do that fits in your lifestyle.
Yeah, well, and I like what you're saying because it's something that's very personal. You're recognizing that there are people like Paul who are called to do that tent making and also, be missionaries and share the gospel. And then sometimes, I know you and I were talking the other day, sometimes there are people who are like Levites, where they're just called to be fully immersed in it. But even somebody who's called to be fully 100% immersed, they still can consider the idea of planning for retirement or planning for their financial future. So there's no context in which a missionary is to never consider their future. It's just the degree to which they do it. And we are all different.
And I think that a challenge that I have for every missionary is to look at your budget and to make sure that you're making room for retirement. So that'll bring my second point, which is investments. And so here's another statistic that for the average middle class person in America, retirement accounts account for 23% of their wealth. So this piece of the puzzle is very significant for the middle class. And that is setting money away monthly into a retirement account. And I would challenge every missionary to adjust your budget to include retirement. And I know that's a challenge because you're already thinking it's hard enough to raise what I have. And it's like, well, I'm just gonna challenge you. It's like, make sure that you make room for it in your budget.
Yeah.
So I have another missionary testimony. Uh, so a couple of years ago, there was a donor that was partnering with one of our missionaries, and they said, we are concerned about your retirement. And they actually gave them a significant gift for retirement.
Wow.
And that actually led to modern day creating a what's called a 403B, which is the nonprofit version of a 401k, or that every modern day missionary can actually put money into retirement through the donations that they receive. And, so we do the heavy lifting for them. We create the account, so they still have to pick, the actual investments. Um, but this was actually initiated because a donor was concerned about this. And I think that if we listen to what people are saying, sometimes our donors are asking us about our retirement and they don't like the answer that they said, that we give them. But what if we give donors that ability where we could say, well, we do have a retirement account that people can give it to. And that I think that we'll see more and more donors caring about this.
That is a really interesting perspective. And you're right. There might be donors who, especially, let's say they're starting to reach retirement age, so it's more on their mind as well. They might be all about that because they care about us as
Yeah.
people, and they care about us not just on the field, but holistically, thinking of our whole lives. So, what would you say to somebody who's listening, a missionary who's listening, who says, "I want to get started with this"? How do they get started with investing with modern day, if that's what they choose?
Well, we are actually going to open up the plan again for missionaries to contribute. And so, starting in July, missionaries who have not already joined, because we already have some missionaries that are giving money every month into their retirement accounts, but where they will be able to give, put money directly into the retirement account, and it's not taxable income to them today. But there's versions if they want to, do it a different way. But all they need to do is respond to the email that we're going to send out in the next month or two, and just say, "Hey, please, we want to put this amount of money into the retirement, and we'll handle deducting it from their account and uh, making the deposit into their retirement account."
Right, and so all they have to do, because 'cause you'd mentioned something about them having to choose investments, and what that might sound complicated to somebody. Does that mean they're specifically choosing exactly how they're investing or choosing a particular plan?
They're actual investments, but our plan has something that's really geared towards your age, and I tend to tell most people just go with that. It says if you're 35, uh, invest according to the best for people age 35, and then there's 55 and 65. There's all these age ones, and it basically is how aggressive and how conservative a fund are. So if somebody doesn't want to get into all of that, they can just do their age, and that's easy. But if they really do care, they're able to actually select individual funds.
Okay, so that's kinda great. So for people who just wanna invest, but they don't wanna get into all the nitty-gritty details, there is a button for them to be able to click that says, "The easy version according to my age." But
Yes.
for those people who just love nerding out on all of that, they have that option as well.
Which I don't even do that. I mean, I go with the age thing. It's like I think they know more than I do, so I'll just trust them on that.
Right, right. And so okay, so we've got investing. So people make a decision, they're investing, they're planning for the future. Then there was one other thing that you'd mentioned, and that was owning assets.
Yes. So, just a little while ago, I mentioned the retirement accounts is 23% of a average middle class person's wealth. Real estate is actually 40%.
Really?
So, the average homeowner in America has a median net worth of $255,000, but the median net worth of a renter is $6,300.
That is a huge
Okay.
difference.
So a homeowner, 250,000, renter, 6,000. Okay. That is talking about how important property ownership is for people. Now, about 45% of our missionaries are actually based in America. And so already, many of them already have homes. But I want to challenge them. It's like, if you feel that the Lord has you in a place for maybe 5 years, consider buying instead of renting.
And you're talking about internationally right now.
Well, I'm actually talking domestically,
Okay,
but
domestically.
I am now going to talk about international, because many people are thinking, well, I'm in another country. So I want to give an example of one of our missionaries. They bought a home here in the US. But when they went to the mission field, they sold it. So they had this amount of equity. And so they were just, praying about what to do with it. And they talked with me, and they were living in Europe. And I told them, I said, buy the property. It's, buy a house there. You're going to be there for a while. Just go ahead and buy a house. And so they did. They ended up buying a house. And I can't remember how many years later, 5 or 7 years later, that property increased in value so much that they sold it and had a huge return. Well, then they moved to their next mission field. And not only were they able to buy a house, they actually bought a bed and breakfast. And so it was a large home with about 5 or 6 rooms that they could rent. And now they have a website and, people can come and stay with them. They've actually added more apartments to their little bed and breakfast. But it all was them starting here in America, then investing overseas. And I know it's a little daunting to think of that, of actually buying property overseas, and maybe it's not for everybody, but I do think that for some people, that might actually be a very good thing for them to do.
Yeah, and I suppose it depends on the stability of the country that you're in. It depends
Yes.
on
Yeah.
the the possibilities of it. Will a bank loan to you? What do all those things look like? But it sounds like you're suggesting that whether it's back in your passport country or it's where you're serving abroad, consider that as an option.
Yeah. And even, I think, if you are an American living overseas, maybe you can consider buying an investment property in the US. So that's another thing is like nowadays there's property managers that'll manage everything for you. And they'll find a renter, they'll collect the rent, they will repair things, and you don't even uh, hardly do anything. So that's not even an excuse. And I would think that also, if you have a property, then, maybe you can get like some Airbnb rental income or something like that. So anyway, these are all just ideas. Really, what I want to do is just get people thinking outside of the box. It's like, okay, maybe all of these, maybe you don't like this idea or that idea, but it's really about all of these are pieces of your financial puzzle. And you need to be actively doing something
Yeah.
that is creating additional income, that's creating future investment, payouts, that's creating equity that you can then use in your retirement years.
Yeah. Okay. So you've kind of invited us to this financial buffet and you have laid out different options in each one of these three categories and are encouraging us to take some bites and try things out and see what's the best fit for us. So, Elias, for somebody who's looking at this spread and they don't know where to begin, they're equal parts excited and overwhelmed by the amount of options in front of them. What would you suggest would be a great first step for somebody who's just ready to do one thing?
Well, I mean, the place that I would suggest for people to start is to look at their monthly income right now and how much can they start putting into the modern day 403b. So maybe it's $50 a month, maybe it's $100 a month, maybe it's more. It's, just ask the Lord. It's like, am I supposed to do something with that? But then the other thing is, what can be an additional source of revenue? Back to Ecclesiastes is, maybe I'm putting all of my eggs in this donation bucket, and, maybe I need other sources. So just ask the Lord, what can I do? Maybe there's something that I can do. I was talking with a prospective missionary. Actually, no, he actually just joined us, and he had the opportunity. He's very creative and has a nice little, job, very creative job, and there's a possibility that he can do that part time on the field. And I was telling him, you need to pray about that. It's like maybe the Lord is providing for you by keeping that part time job.
That's how we started on the field the first 7 years that we lived down in Peru. I worked part-time for a company back in the US, and it was a huge blessing, not just financially, but the relationships that I had there, the opportunities that I had for traveling back and forth. I was really grateful for it. So the majority of the time I've been a missionary, I have worked in some capacity. And I don't feel like it has taken away from the ministry I've been able to do. And in the season where it did, there were a few years where I did lay it down. And then he opened it back up again. So I think you're right. Sometimes we get into this mindset that it has to be a particular way. And it's just saying, hey, Lord, what do you have for me? What are some options that I perhaps should consider that I ruled out? And how might my donors or our support team be able to encourage me in that and maybe have some ideas? I have one last question. Elias, I know that not everybody who listens to the podcast is a missionary with modern day. So for somebody who's a missionary not with modern day who's listening, I mean, obviously the first thing we're going to say is come join us here at Modern Day because we would love to have you. But is there a way for somebody to become a part of the investment with modern day? Maybe they're part of an agency or they have a support team to also join modern day.
Yeah, we at modern day we don't have any exclusivity clause, so a person can actually split their time, their resources between two organizations. So if that is something that your organization doesn't provide, and if you want to join us just to be able to take advantage of that, we would love to have you, but then you can also just, there's lots of options out there, just regular IRA that you can just go and there's certain limits that you're able to put in. So there's different options out there uh, that you can just search for.
Okay, so that's good to know. So for people who are part of an agency or who already have a way to process their donations, they still can join up with us here at Modern Day as well. And also, if they are a part of an agency, maybe it's asking them, "Hey, do you have something set up here where we could invest?" Or maybe it's meeting with a financial planner. There's a lot of different options. So it's not using any of those as an excuse to not do it. There are options out there. And so it's just taking that first step, making the phone call.
Well, as I said earlier, we created our 403B because a missionary received a donation. So this whole process originated from a missionary asking us as a missionary organization to start one. So if you're out there with another missionary organization, and if they don't have one, perhaps you could challenge them to start one.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, I bet that everybody's got a whole bunch of ideas swimming in their heads right now, hopefully some things jotted down on paper. And I know your hope, Elias, mine too, is that people take a step forward in their financial health and start planning better for their future, not only for themselves, but for the people they serve so they can stay longer on the field, for their families who will definitely thank them as they get older. God cares about us now and he cares about our future as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes. So for all of you listening, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with everybody you know who needs to hear it. And we will look forward to seeing you on our next episode.